So in this video we're going to look at quite an interesting article, but as I've said, I'm going to try and start really looking into sort of the naturopathic doctors and some of the ridiculous stuff they said. So I thought we'd start here. This is an article on exojane.com. It happened to me. Alternative medicine and poor critical thinking skills almost killed me. The alternative medicine is the same sort of victim-blaming, life-shaming, sacrificial culture as fundamentalist religion. How true. I've already done a video on the fact that, these people argue like creationists, and it doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't, because a lot of these people are so dogmatic when it comes to alternative medicine. It's ridiculous. Oh, I'm going to leave a link to the article down below so you can read it, but I'm sort of going to read through it. I'm going to comment as we go through it as well. I've loved science since my first chemistry class in high school. By my 20s, I'd lost my way. I often say that an alternative universe where I was never sick and had been better and had better critical thinking skills as a young adult, I might have a PhD by now. But here in this universe, I do not. Thanks to my own expert level motivational reasoning and meeting the wrong people at the wrong time, it's taken me about 4 years of therapy to sort out the damage. A notable feature of the clusterfuck that was my 20s was my brief tenure at one of the country's 4 accredited naturopathic medical schools. I had my sights set on a naturopathic medical degree, an ND. My trajectory from science-loving teen to self-important health nut is a winding and sordid tale too long for this article. It was in a course I took in college, one dreary fall semester called Alternative Medicine and Society, where I learnt of naturopathic medicine. Looking back, the course was pretty appealing. We learned about debunked spoon-bending magician Uri Geller, traditional Chinese medicine, homeopathy, holistic nutrition, cranisolar theory, dowsing, wildcrafting, coloured light therapy, healing gadgets, and Kwang masters who lived without eating, acupuncture, and the Marasu Etamo water crystal experiments. As a cultural studies course, this would have been acceptable and even interesting. However, these things were taught to us as legitimate science. Fortunately, that department didn't last. A few years ago, it folded due to lack of enrolment. I wonder why. At the time, I thought real doctors were like the Borg. That's quite funny, considering some of the statements and comments I've seen over the years of my videos about alternative therapy. You don't get a second opinion because they all had the same opinion. I had an illness called ulcerative colitis, and I was struggling with it. So I was very bitter about not being cured by conventional medical standards. Well, other than having my colon removed, but I rejected that option as barbaric and knee-jerked. Naturopathy seemed like a bold move forward for medical science. These NDs supposedly had the same science training as MDs, but could give patients more opportunities besides drugs and surgery. I bought the rhetoric. I wanted to learn to treat illness at the root cause, rather than through symptom management. I wanted to understand why I had ulcerative colitis, and I really wanted to fix it so it wouldn't come back. Then I wanted to help others do the same. I graduated from college with a degree in nutrition and immediately applied to naturopathic medical school. The school put on a good show, convincing the applicants it was competitive and selective. It certainly enabled me to justify the fact that no GER or MCAT scores were required for admission, and that everyone I met on interview day was present at orientation. During my 1 month of study, I experienced condescension from instructors, shaming from peers, and generally very little support when I actually needed it. It was extremely cliquey. I was told by upperclassmen that students practiced giving each other exams during the third and fourth clinicals, including the prostate and gynecological variety. I was horrified at that thought. Turns out they really do that, mostly because there are sometimes not enough real patients available for budding NDs to get their requisite clinical experience. The coursework was disappointing too. At the time, I was fine with homeopathy diets, herbal whatever, and sweating out toxins. I was encouraged to continue with my crazy restrictive diets by instructors and peers. I thought I was experiencing the cutting edge of medicine. But you already see by this point, you know, having bought into this rhetoric, what she was going through. And again, these people don't, because once, as I've said before, it's the same with conspiracy theories, it's a web. Once you start to get tangled up in one thread, you very quickly find that they are tangled up in every single other thread, because once you've got one thread, you're then going to have another thread, because this thread ties into another thread, and so on and so on. So they're very quickly, you know, entangled. I was just surprised that the biochemistry course wasn't more difficult. I was worried that if I finished ND school, I'd still need another degree in biochemistry to really understand medicine. And that's the kicker. Again, later on we're going to have a look at, you know, some of these ND courses, and it's quite horrifying what, you know, they learn. Well, I say horrifying, it's ridiculous, because I wouldn't let an ND treat me at all. I emailed my notes and syllabus to my friend's wife, who was a few years into a regular medical school, for feedback. She confirmed my fear that it was far too elementary, even for a first-year course. I ended up having to take temporary leave of absence because of a particularly nasty coitus flare, for which I was shamed and abandoned by my school friends. During my time off from school, I began to research the actual ND job market. It was bleak. Very few in the science community seemed to take the degree seriously, and rightly so. For much as it was costing me to be there in loans, that realization sat like a pit in my stomach. And then there's a picture of a library. I was 2,000 miles away from my family, and I had no backup plan. I got a job at a health food store to buy me some time to figure out what to do next, and I reached out to all my natural medicine contacts I had made throughout the school, and I was met with only different shades of victim blaming. I'd actually be very interested to know that, if anyone out there has actually ever been to a naturopathic doctor and had the same experience, and what their experiences have been going to an ND. Maybe it's you're too negative. Maybe your body attacks itself because you have low self-esteem. I just have to nod my head at that, just go, what the fuck? Maybe you need to cut more carbs, or it's an allergy you haven't yet discovered yet. Maybe you need this or that supplement, or a chiropractic adjustment. And have you read Van Deer or Deepak Chopra? maybe you just need to meditate or exercise more or do yoga. Maybe this one healer can help you because she totally helped my friend, and I heard she performed remote psychic surgery on a guy 108 miles away. I even met an old hippie in an RV on the side of a road for an inexpensive acupuncture session. Shockingly, I was not raped or murdered. Not shockingly, none of the above interventions did jack shit. However, I did hate myself a whole lot more. More walls came down. My personal life and finances began to crumble, and on top of my poor health, I couldn't cope. I permanently withdrew from the ND school, not because I had stopped believing, because it was just becoming a logistical impossibility. All signs pointed to get the fuck out. I made a few more desperate grabs at health. I made an appointment with a naturopath who said that because my body temperature ran slightly lower than 98.6, it was 97.1, it meant that I had some thyroid issues. He ordered some hormone blood tests and prepared a custom medical powder for me to mix into smoothies. It contains herbs and decanted animal glands. He asked me to name it, so I tearfully called it Happy Powder. The Happy Powder didn't work. I was still sick. I phoned an appointment with a homeopath, an ND who practiced in another state. Homeopathy is just a synonym for natural. It's the delicate art of separating patients from money by giving them sugar pills or water, claiming it contains medicine. She recommended all sorts of remedies that didn't work. I called her once in tears, saying I'd just passed half a cup of blood in the toilet. She told me it was because I was not being diligent enough with my regime. I cursed her out and hung up on her. My roommate found me crawling around on the floor, looking for a phone to call 911. I was nearly blacking out. She drove me to an emergency room where I was admitted for 3 weeks. I weighed 100 pounds, and after my release at 26 years old, I had moved across the country to be back with my parents. Back home, I tried more alternative medicine for 3 more years before ending up in the ICU with acute kidney failure and out of control inflammatory bowel symptoms. From all these useless drugs and supplements, I was ingesting it without proper follow-up from proper qualified medical professional. You know, do I even need to go on at this point? I think you see where all this is going. And basically, I'm basically going to stop reading there, because basically you get the picture. You know, none of it was working. And none of it was working for her, very clearly. And she got more sicker and sicker from basically, I think eventually she actually ended up going the conventional route, and she's actually fine now. But I'm just going to jump to the end. I'm certainly not the first to say this, but alternative medicine is a fundamentalist religion. It's the same sort of victim-blaming, life-shaming, sacrificial culture that my husband dealt with when growing up in an evangelical church. We discuss our parallel experiences often. Alternative medicine is a salvation-based religion, except that instead of eternity in heaven, you get perfect health. It's exactly what they're peddling. What more can you say to that? And again, we're going to have a deeper look at some of the courses and what these naturopathic doctors are actually saying. But that basically gives you an idea, particularly when she's at the college, what they were learning. Very clearly there, in biochemistry, they weren't even learning enough what a a first year medical student was learning. You know, what do they know about medicine then? Nothing.